Welcome to Unscripted with Marilyn Morales. Today, my beautiful co-host is Lizette Sierra. How are you
Hi
doing?
everyone. How you doing, Marilyn?
Good, good. So, Lizette, share with us who you are, what you do, all about Lizette.
Well, when I turned 50, I decided to change career paths. I was running a consulting firm for many years with a partner and decided just to change it up. And it all fell into place. Turned 50 literally within weeks. Turned 50 and received an offer to work with the Department of Education for an alternative program for eighth graders. Um, the overage eighth grader component of this alternative program. And for the last 5.5 years, I am the community associate for one of the sites here in New York City, servicing overage eighth graders. And basically, what I do is I recruit them, I imprint with them, manage behaviors with the guidance counselor, and provide everything that they need from academics. Even though I don't teach, but still, I become sometimes they need that extra help. I become that, help them with their behavior issues, family issues, and also help parents to navigate their very difficult teenagers.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And that's why, guys, you're going to know why I chose Lizette to be my co-host today. So, our very special guest today is Andrea Bitner. And let me read her bio. Andrea Bitner is an educator, author, and speaker. She lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She has worked with students in grades K through 12 throughout her 22 years in public education from all around the world. Her first book, Take Me Home, was published by Austin Macauley in July of 2021. Take Me Home is a true story of 11 of her former EL students who gave a firsthand account of what it's really like to become bilingual in America. She is also a co-author of Chip Baker's The Impact of Influence, Volume 3, and Dr. Rick Jetter's 100 No-Nonsense Things All School Leaders Shout Stop Doing. She travels the country speaking and teaching educators how to teach and reach EL students and effectively communicate with EL families. Let's welcome Andrea to the show.
Hey,
Hello.
everybody. Thanks
Love
for
that
having me.
bio.
Thank you.
Right? How impressive is that? And I will tell you, Lizette and I coming from Brooklyn, New York, being bilingual ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
I have so many questions for you, right?
Me
And I'm
too.
sure she has a lot too. Because we have our perspective as well as being bilingual and growing up in the city, but we were both born in New York. So a little different than the students that you service, right?
Absolutely. Sure.
Yeah. So Andrea, take me back to before you became this educator. Who is Andrea? How did you grow up? And what inspired you to become an educator?
Yes. So I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And, when I think about it now, I really lived in a bubble. I come from a really small town. It wasn't very diverse. And all of the people that I knew in my elementary school and middle school and high school, they were all like me, young suburban kids, had never really traveled the world much, never really stepped out of the state other than PA, Jersey, and Delaware, maybe a trip to Disney once in my life, things like that.
Right.
I always loved school. I was a good student. I enjoyed my teachers. I had two particular teachers, Miss Schulman and Dr. Wright, in high school, that told me I was pretty good at writing. And that kind of inspired me to go, oh, wow, maybe I could do something like that in the future. I should be an English teacher. And so I started off as a high school English teacher. And before I became that teacher, I was always, a social girl, involved in everything I could get my hands on: student council, band, marching band, high school musicals, all those things. And it just really helped me have what I would call a pretty easy childhood.
Mhm.
My first friend that I ever met that spoke a language different than me was my friend Irina from Russia. And I still can see us on the playground in elementary school, just running around, playing together, not being able to speak yet to each other, but she's still one of my dear friends today.
Wow.
Wow.
And a lot of things are communication. You just touched on that with children, right? That don't have the ability to speak to one another, right? Before they can learn a language, even if it's English for the both of them,
Mhm.
they use other methods to communicate with one another. So
They
that speaks to that.
They do. I always say, lack of language never equals lack of intelligence. And I think a lot of people make that mistake, and so they can easily communicate their attributes in a lot of different ways, even when they don't have the language yet.
Got it.
I agree.
Excellent.
I
Was that?
agree. And I think that, to add on to what you say, I think that um, misconception is accents with not being intelligent. So a lot of times there's that misconception. Well, if you have an accent, well, it's. I don't know how they get to that point, but they say, well,
Mhm.
you have this thick accent, therefore you cannot be intelligent or educated. And
Wow.
so,
And it's the exact opposite. An accent
Right.
indicates I can do something that you can't.
That's right.
absolutely,
I
and
can do
multiple
something that
language.
you can. And I always, tell my kids that now that I work with all the time. Your parents gave you a gift.
Mhm.
They didn't have to. They chose to. And so with that in mind, they kind of realize that right around third grade is when they start to become aware that they're bilingual. And my first and second graders that I work with, it's very simple to them. They don't always understand that they can do something yet that other kids can't. I'll give you an example. I have a young second grader, and I said to her, "Hey, I said, do you know you've got this gift that mommy gave you? You can speak to mommy in different languages and to Mrs. B in different ones." And she looked at me and she goes, "Miss B, it's really not hard." She said, "I just look at mommy and say a couple words, and I look at you and I say a couple different words. What's the difference?" And I just laughed with her. And she doesn't have that awareness yet, but right around third grade is when our guys start to go, "Oh, my English is better than mom's sometimes."
Right.
Or, "Oh, I can speak with mom in tree and I can speak with Mrs. R in English." And, oh, everybody doesn't do that. And so I really love to see that happen over time.
Right.
That's
So
important.
you shared that, your upbringing was pretty sheltered, right? Not a lot of
Mhm.
diversity.
No.
So how did you get into the field of dealing with children of different languages? Share that with us.
Yes. So I got really curious about working with kids and at-risk kids, kids that needed support in all different levels right when I came out of college. And I graduated from Westchester University back in 2001. And I was given right away, I got a job over the weekend from the high school I went to. And so I walked in being that studious, right, bubbled girl who loves school. And I was given the toughest kids in the building, right? I was given like the kids that hated school. And I remember coming home my whole first year of teaching and crying every day because I would say to my family, "I don't know why they don't like school." And what I realized really quickly after that is that my ninth graders couldn't read and I wasn't equipped to teach them how. And so they taught me more that year than I could ever teach them about the bigger world I was never exposed to. And so from that, I got really curious about, well, how do I do that? So I went back to school and I became a reading specialist. And I said, okay, now I've got those tools for my backpack. I know what to do when a kid walks in, no matter what grade level, and figure out how to teach them to read. And after that, I started to work with middle school kids who were reading support, what we called, average kids who had missed some things along the way for whatever reason. And now they're in middle school and I'm teaching them how to read. And I started to have English language learners in my groups. And so I started to get curious about that. And I wanted some more tools for my backpack. And I had this great grade partner named Mike Kinka across the hall who worked with all the ELs in the building. And so I used to lean on him a lot. "What do I do, Mike? I've got a newcomer. I'm not sure how to handle that. And so I went back to school again and I got a 2-year certification and became an English language learner teacher. And then I kind of settled down. But I loved those kids the most. I loved working with the ELs. I loved working with the Title I kids. I loved working with the kids in the high school level, middle school level. It didn't matter to me. All kids are the same. I always say they're looking to feel respected, they're looking to feel accepted, and they're looking to feel admired. And the high school kids are just little kids in big bodies. And if for me, it didn't matter who walked in the room. They're the 3 things I tried to give to them to help them feel successful.
That's interesting. Did you language? Did you learn any particular language, Spanish or other, the communities that you were serving? did you have to then learn 5, 6, 10 languages in order to help them along?
So in my population of students I've worked with, I didn't really have that option because we have over 25 different languages represented. And so you train to be an English language learner teacher, just like you would train to be any other profession. You would train to be a math teacher. You would learn the strategies and concepts and assessments, etc., to teach kids math. And so in the EL program, I call it that lens shift. You're putting on those glasses that say, okay, now I know what to do, how to assess, diagnose, instruct, etc. EL kids when they come into the building and the different levels that they come in. So no, I don't know how to speak many languages. I do speak enough Spanish to get by. And I had the opportunity to travel to El Salvador on 3 different occasions to work with a school down there. So I got to know what it was like to walk into a place where I stepped off the plane. I lovingly called it dirt roads and dogs. It was not touristy. And I spent a few weeks there on 3 different occasions. And I had to speak Spanish. I didn't have an option. And so I felt that trepidation. I felt that hesitancy. And I was practicing and I was getting ready, right? And I have a dear friend who wrote part of our book in Spanish. She did the translation for me. She's a professor. So I, trained with her in terms of here's my survival language. Here's what I need to get going. And when I stepped into that group at a party they were having, I had maybe 7 go-to sentences, and that was it. And I was getting those headaches at the end of the day because my brain was working that dual language, that double cross, right? That people experience. And when someone would speak English, I felt relief because every once in a while there'd be a person who there was bilingual in English and Spanish. And I would hear one gentleman, very funny story. I hear from across the way, I'm walking down a dirt road and they had little trucks on the sides and things were being sold. And I hear, "Hello, beautiful American woman. I speak English. Do you need a translator?" And I was like,
"Love it." And you were just saying, "Oh, someone looked over me. Thank you."
It was a little relief. I felt like, oh, I can put my tools down for a minute. But I loved that experience. It taught me a lot about the world. People there had next to nothing and they were so happy. So happy.
I think what I get from that experience is that you were placed in the shoes of your students when they get here.
I think I finally got it. Yes, absolutely. All of those navigation pieces that I needed, where to go, where am I, who can I count on, what can I find, what limited things can I say? Wow, these are new foods. This is new landscape. These are lifestyles I've never seen before. And everything I might have thought wasn't true. Right. And so, yeah, absolutely. I did get to really step into their shoes.
Right. Because you have a connection with them.
Yeah. And your perspective is also different, right? Because you can only imagine the lives that they had. And I know in your book, Take Me Home, I love the fact that, what their lives were like is described, right? What an everyday life looked like. And that's hard to imagine. But when you go there and you visit yourself, that changes your perspective completely. So now you've taught from elementary to high school in EL, correct?
Yes.
So which population, which age range do you find the easiest and which one is the most difficult?
So instead of thinking of it in terms of age range, I would suggest we think of it in terms of 2 things: language proficiency level and the age at which they arrive in our district, because we're their chance at a free education, right? Mom and dad, or mom and family, dad and family, etc., have put them in this great situation where they get to go to school for free. They're supplying the second language at home. We're going to take care of the English, right? And so I always look at when they arrive, how long do we have with them? And the biggest indicator for our kids is how strong are they in their first language? Because if they've got roots, if they've been formally educated in literacy and in speaking and in listening and in writing skills in their first language, depending on its distance from English, that's a home run, because now all I have to do is teach them the differences, right? I have to teach them the differences in the sounds between Spanish and English, or French and English, or Russian and English, etc. But if they come in as, let's say, a late middle high school student, the clock is ticking. And if they come in, especially with no formal education, and I have had it all. I've had kids that have been formally educated in boarding schools. I've had kids that have learned English in their schools in India. I've had kids that have never been to school. I've had kids that had the choice when they were a few from Salvador, where they were given the choice to learn to read or play soccer every day. And I still see this student now. And at that time, he chose to play soccer. Who wouldn't, right?
Right.
But when he comes to us, now he's a middle school 7th grade kid who I have to start to teach how to read. And so it just makes that difference. So really it comes down to that language proficiencies and formal education and how much time do we have?
Wow. And you get a whole mix of that in one classroom. Like, how do they decide who to put into the classroom? Is it all ninth graders, 10th graders? Like, how does that work?
So in our district in particular, we group by proficiency level. So,
Oh,
so
okay.
you have grade bands and proficiency. So I have kids in 2nd and 3rd grade who are level what we call beginner, 1-2 kids. I've got a level 3 class, which I call the sweet spot because they've got enough social language because you have social language and academic language. They've got enough social language to have their survival skills, to manage the building, to speak in social situations. But now they are ready to expand. So it's not everything is not my day was good. It's my day was fabulous. My day was awesome, right? You're ready to that jumping point, I say. When you look at kids who are level 4 or 5, they may not need to see me every single day. They may see me twice a week because we're working on that last piece of the academic writing that we've been working on all along in order for them to exit the program. So it really just depends. But I say the best way to schedule for those kids is by proficiency level and grade bands.
Got it. Makes total
So
sense.
so your students, are they in regular mainstream classes and then they come see you at a particular time of the day? And do they tend to gravitate to each other and develop a community of their own?
They do. So depending on the level of the student and depending on the school they're in, depends on how we might schedule that. So for example, yes, to answer your question, at the elementary level, my kids see me, I see my level 1-2 kids 4 days a week for 30 to 40 minutes a day. My level 3 kids, I see for 3 days a week. My level 4 kids that are ready to go, I see them for 2 days a week. But at the high school level, we've got different options. They've got English language support class. They've got an English language newcomer class, and they're scheduled with credits for 45 minutes a day. We've got a Spanish for native speakers class that this amazing woman, Liliana Ruiz, teaches. And she was an English language learner herself who became a teacher, where she teaches kids who speak Spanish literacy skills. And not only that, she developed an opportunity for them to take a test to become translators upon leaving high school. And so it's
Wow.
a great job
I
opportunity
like that.
when they leave, right? Then we have an EL consult class. So they're your higher level kids who need academic support. They're larger grouped because our other classes that are lower level in terms of proficiency level, there's no more than like 10 kids in those classes. But when you get to the high school level 4 or 5 kid, it's like, okay, they need the academic support. They're ready for that piece to help them in all the other classes they're navigating. Our kids are in AP classes. They're in honors classes. They're in, depending on what they need, remedial classes. They're all different. And that was the whole point, right? They're all so different.
Oh,
Wow.
that's amazing. I have to tell you, that is amazing. And I think more programs, the way you guys are running it, really needs to be copied, and it needs to be done in a lot of other districts, especially here in New York City. In the school that I particularly work in, I know that the host school, like there's 7 schools in one building, and the host school, they do have a particular group of kids that they started this program, I want to say maybe a year or two ago, and the kids are usually together. And I've seen that now expanding, but I think their program needs to be tweaked a little bit, and they definitely would benefit from seeing your model and how that works, and see how that can actually be incorporated. I find a lot of I have a student who is from El Salvador, and it's funny that you said that in El Salvador, that you mentioned that, because I asked him yesterday, I said, what age did you come to the States? And he says, he goes, I think he was 8 years old when he came.
Mm-hmm.
I said, oh, so you went to school in El Salvador first. So how did it feel when you got here? He goes, I didn't go to school.
Mm-hmm.
I went, you didn't go to school. Now he's very bright.
Yep.
And I go, you didn't go to school? He goes, I didn't like this. I got bullied a lot over there.
Mm-hmm.
I went, oh, I said, and when you got here, how did that work for you? did you have problems when you got here with the other kids and said, he goes, no, I was fine. And he started to learn when he got here.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of think about too, your second part of the question where you asked, how do we community build? Do our kids stick together? They do. And we're really intentional about that. So what we created were some building wide and district wide meeting times for all of our kids so that they can get to know each other across grade levels. So for example, we did a huge building wide holiday gathering. I want my first and second graders to know the other kids that speak Arabic in fifth and sixth grade, because then they start to go, oh, I'm not the only one. And you're like, no, you've got a gift. And guess what? He's got it too. And guess what? You can rely on him if you need something. And my middle school kids kind of wear that feather in their cap and go, yeah, I can help you. And you instill those leadership skills. And then it goes up to the high school level where those kids are looked up to by the middle school kids. And so we created some district-wide activities. We have 4 of them during the year where we get them on the buses and we gather them at a host school and we do all kinds of fun stuff. And it's really intentional. Sometimes we group them by language for part of the day so they can meet other kids. Sometimes we don't. But the point is, you're all bilingual. You're all amazing. You've got this gift. And guess what? There's lots of kids just like you who have it too. And so it spreads their awareness. And then we started to say, hey, well, if we can do that district-wide, why can't we do it county-wide? So they created at the local IU a county-wide EL camp. And so in the summer, they bus kids in from all the districts that want to go, and they get to do fun activities together. So just, imagine expanding the circle. And your student sounds amazing, and the fact that he's doing that well, I mean, so proud of him.
He is, and he is definitely one of my stars in the classroom, and I do appreciate. And I speak to him in both languages. Sometimes, when I want to say what I gotta say, and I want to else understand, I'll talk to him. But I think it's really amazing, and it does bring a lot of. It expands other children who are not exposed at home or have a second language or a third language, and just realizing, wow, we're not that different other than a language.
No.
And they get to learn other cultures. And just like your experience, your best friend from Russia.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a different culture all the way around.
So. Listen, languages and culture. So Andrea, share with our viewers about Take Me Home. Talk to us about that.
Yes. So about 10 years ago, I was working with a particular group of English language learners at Interboro High School. I had about 40 different kids at the time with about 25 different languages. And they came from all walks of life. I had kids who were adopted. I had kids who were exchange students. I had kids who had crossed the border. I had kids who had waited 10 years for a visa and came after their mom and dad set up. I had kids who came before their parents and lived with family here until the rest of the family could come. I had kids from boarding schools. So we had a very different platform of students because they were all from different places and all from different experiences. And we had this huge banner in our classroom and it said, "What's your plan?" Because we knew as their teachers and the teams that I worked with at the high school that their only plan couldn't be, I'm going to return to my country. And their only plan couldn't be, well, I was born here or mom and dad brought me here and I'm not going to try. I'm not going to be successful. So what we did every year was we had our alumni come back who were out in the world as successful young bilingual people. And we had this senior celebration day. And the job of the alumni was to come back, tell them about what was waiting for them out in that real world, good, bad, and ugly, and then to bring them a t-shirt. And that t-shirt would say wherever they were headed next. It didn't matter. It could be entrepreneurship. It could be military. It could be college, university, training, YouTuber. We didn't care. Wherever their plan was headed, we were there to celebrate that senior year. And on that day, they would get to sign that banner to say, I completed this chapter of my life's plan. And so with that in mind, there was one particular family I worked with, the Lopez family. They were from the country of El Salvador. And they had all sons and one daughter. And so I worked with all of them over many years during that time that I was there. And I went to a different building the following year. And one of the children I had worked with's name was Nancy. She was the only female in the Lopez family that I had taught. And so about a year later, one day I was teaching and there were a bunch of helicopters outside. And I thought, well, I hope everything's all right today. I don't know what's going on. Like, there seems like there's a lot of helicopters outside.
Right.
And so about an hour later, my principal came down to get me. to let me know that one of my students had been hit by the train. And that student was Nancy. And unfortunately, she passed away that day. She had on a pair of headphones. And when we watched the video, we saw that she had made a decision to walk along the inside of the track to cross. And she didn't hear the Acela that came and it clipped her from behind. And so
God.
at that time, it really threw this family, this community, mom was and dad were pastors in the city of Philadelphia. Dad's a pastor, mom works alongside of him. And so it threw this beautiful community that I've worked with for so many years into this sense of trauma. And we had to navigate that for many weeks after that. One of the most troubling parts of that day was that there was nobody local on the force that spoke Spanish. So when mom and dad got the call that something had happened, they could understand, because they were still learning English themselves, that something was wrong. They could understand that something had happened to one of the children, but they didn't know which one it was. So they were up on those tracks for a very long time, for hours, trying to call everybody and figure out who was there. And so as we went through that experience in the coming weeks, we navigated the immigration process, trying to get her brother to be able to come up and bury his sister, which he was denied a visa, trying to reach out to the local community to help mom and dad navigate how to bury Nancy, trying to work with the church that was showing up every night locally with their chairs to sit with the parents as they went through this, trying to help the kids in our building who have this family of these wonderful kids they've known for years. And so as we went through that process, one of my jobs at her funeral was to speak. And so at the time, I wrote a short poem, and it was called Take Me Home. And it was an homage to Nancy's crossing into the US. She happened to be one of my kids that crossed the border. And so after that experience, I continued to teach these cool, great kids. And I put that piece of paper on my desk. And a few months later, I saw it sitting there and I thought, well, maybe somebody could benefit from this story. Maybe something about it would help them. So I sent that poem out on a whim. And about a few months later, a publisher got back to me and they said, hey, Andrea, we really like your poem, but we don't want you to write a poem. We want you to write a book. And we're going to give you about 6 months to do it. And if you come back with something that we like, we're going to take you on and publish it. So I started to think to myself, well, I don't just want to tell her story. I want to tell all of their stories because they're so different. And so many people make the assumption, like we were talking about earlier, that they're all the same, that the accent equals Y, that the language level equals Z, that this country equals X, right? So what I decided to do was take those 6 months, and it was kind of like pre-pandemic through the pandemic, and go back and find 11 of my former English language learners who are now like late 20s, early 30s. And I asked them questions I thought we had missed. And what I said to them was, now that you're a young bilingual professional living and working out in the world, and you have the communication skills to reflect back on your high school experience or school experiences, what was that really like for you? And so from those conversations, I interviewed all of them. We created Take Me Home, and it's told in first person through their eyes. We hit almost every continent and we hit almost every experience, and we weave Nancy's story through it. I went back and interviewed mom and dad. So we have it written in English. It repeats in Spanish, all in the same book. And it's the true story of 11 of my former kids who, I call them kids, they're like 30 now, but who give a firsthand account of what it's really like to become bilingual in America. And we're really proud of it.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing that you were able to do that. This is such a gift to leave this legacy behind, especially for Nancy.
Especially
Absolutely.
Nancy and her family, and
Mhm.
to tell their story and be willing to share her story and their story with the world.
Yes.
Amazing, amazing. And as I was reading the story, one of the things that impacted me was one of the responders was one of your students as well.
That was important. We wanted to include the perspective of someone born here and what that gives them, what that gift gave him. And we call him Embrace in the story. We changed their names to names of strength. So we have names like Grit and Fuel and Embrace and Navigate and Surge and Charge, and we call Nancy Shine. And so, yes, his family was Peruvian. And so he had a different take on people around the world just being born here and being exposed to different cultures.
Wow.
Beautiful. I really thank you for sharing that and writing that book. And I actually look forward to reading some of it to my students and seeing if that promotes and provokes discussion.
We would love that. We've done that where we've met with bilingual kids in other places and we've Zoomed with them. And when I say we, I mean the young people from the book love to join me sometimes and come on and hop and have conversations and give, feedback and advice, to kids of the future. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Listen, I see something fantastic here. Being able to bridge, especially with technology, the way we're doing this right now, right? To be able to do that from Philadelphia to New York City.
Awesome. Let's do
and
it.
have that conversation. Let's get that done, Lizette.
That conversation is good. Absolutely. I actually shared your title of your book and your name with the teacher that runs the English with the that works with the English learners down the hall from me, and he seemed to be very interested. So I'm gonna excitedly tell him on Tuesday how our conversation and to see if they can actually improve and add on, I should say, not so much improve, but add on
I would love
to their experience. And even with my students, because not all my students are bilingual, but to share this with them and have them open up about what their perspective is when they have someone in their class that perhaps doesn't master the English language yet.
Yes, it's really shifting, like we like to say, the hands and hearts across the country. We've gotten so many pieces of feedback from teachers, from educators, admin, students, whether they're bilingual or English speaking students who went, wow, I never really realized that before.
Right.
And one of our goals is to take people's perspectives and turn it from I need English now, which is very popular in the area on the East Coast. We are in the fastest speaking, most impatient part of the country. And so we want to shift that from I want English now to you're learning English. Wow. And that's one of our goals is to shift that.
Love
thinking.
that.
And it's working. It seems to be working.
Listen, we want one person at a time or a group at a time.
For sure.
That's right. Lizette, any final thoughts?
No, I think that you've really touched on a lot of the emotions, the realities, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the in between. And I really appreciate the work that you've been doing and will continue to do, and I hope you do it for a very long time. And I look forward to, if I can, to connect you with as many educators that I can, to reach out with you and just exchange those ideas and just expand it even further.
Thank you.
I really would love to be part of that movement.
Thank you. That would be awesome.
That is fantastic. So, Andrea, one of the things I ask all my guests at the end is, how do you define success?
Yes. So when I think about success or successful people, they have something that unsuccessful people don't. And what that is to me is not how they respond to their wins, it's how they respond to their losses. And every time you have a no, or every time you think something's going to go a certain way and it doesn't, you have a responsibility to yourself to get back up and try it a different way, or get back up and say, I need help, or get back up and find different resources. And the people that are willing to respond in a positive way to their losses are the people that will be most successful.
Amen. Beautiful.
I was just about to say amen myself.
Amen.
I was about to say amen. Absolutely.
That's it. So that is the definition of resilience.
Yes.
So that's it. Success equals resilience. So, Andrea, thank you so much for joining us tonight. How can people get a hold of you? Your one of your websites there is listed. It's scrolling on the bottom. Where else can they get a hold of you?
In addition to our website, AndreaBitnerBooks.com, people can follow us on LinkedIn or on Twitter, and the sign is at Bitner Andrea.
All right, great. Thank you. And for the rest of you, I will see you next time.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gabrielle Morales, and I am a recruitment coordinator for Be The Match. My journey with Be The Match actually began when I was only 9 years old. At that point, my 7-month-old baby sister was diagnosed with an extremely rare form of leukemia. Through the Be the Match registry, we were able to find a matching donor for my sister. And although a few months later we lost her, her cancer was cured. Our family is so thankful for the additional months that we had with my sister. And ever since then, I've made a promise to myself to dedicate my life to helping children just like Isabella and helping families like ours by continuing her legacy. Hence why I now work for Be the Match. I love what I do so much, and I'm able to spread awareness about the huge need for more donors on the registry, especially those of diverse backgrounds. There is currently a huge disparity within the registry for minority patients, and we need your help. It is so simple to save a life and to be put on the registry. You can visit izzy'slegacy.com or text Izzy's Legacy to the number 61474 to start the registration process to be on the Be the Match registry, to hopefully be a life-saving match for a searching patient in need.